Hello and welcome to part 3 of this swing tutorial, and in this section we're going to introduce interacting with the user interface. In the previous one we created a frame and we got it to put hello world in there. Well, on this one we're going to add a button, and you'll see it's actually relatively simple. There's a few ways you can do it in Swing, which take advantage of different features of the Java language. I'm going to show you the easiest one to get you going, but remember it's by no means the only way. It's very important, I can't stress enough in this section, please get a copy of the downloads, the handout and any other data that is in that directory. It's very important because to help keep the flow of the video going, I'm not going to sit there and let you watch me type very slowly and see every typing mistake and just pad the video out for the sake of length, which I know a lot of YouTubers seem to do. I'm not going to do that. So I'm doing the typing and then I put a screenshot up of the finished article with parts highlighted, and we'll discuss what needs to be done and what is relevant and the parts that you need to pay attention to. Full descriptions of how each of these things work, again, it's in the download, so I'm not just going to sit there and read the download out to you. So I can't stress that enough. I think I've said that quite a lot. Okay. Here we have a new project which I created. You should know how to do that if you watched part 1 and some of it in part 2 also as a recap. A new project created, and I've typed in the parts that we need for extending our hello world. Now in this part you can see we've had to import quite a few things. You can see I've highlighted those. You can cut and paste them from the download to save you doing the typing. And then what we do is we create the frame. We make sure we can close it, that operation window contents exit on close. That means add the little crossbar. I always forget videos the other way around. Anyway, adds a little cross at the top of the screen on the title bar, whichever side, which is okay. In Apple's case, it's the other side to everything else. That's Apple for you. Everything is the opposite to everything else. And we add a label. That's the title of the frame. Then we add a button which just says press me. And now this is quite an important call. It's called pack. And what that does is it tells the internals to lay out any content. Now in this case that's relatively easy because there's just one. But if you were building up a complex UI, this is the part where internally it arranges all of the objects and positions them. Now by default things are not visible. Now this is quite good because it means you can build a complex UI part by part, and if it takes a whole load of decision making and quite a bit of code to build the UI, if it's very complex, it can do. You can do it all whilst it's hidden, and then you do the call to set visible on the frame, and then you can see it once it's all finished. So it's a much nicer experience for the user. And if you were to run that now, you would get a small window because we haven't set any dimensions, so you'd get a window which is exactly the right size, which is small. On my system it appears in the top right hand corner. You'll just have to look around and find it on yours, and that's it. Now click on the button, see what happens. That's right, nothing did happen. Well done. It's a case of the lights are home. Sorry, the lights are on, but there's nobody home. Okay, I won't try any more jokes for today. Messed that one up. The reason for that is there's no one listening. You haven't written a listener. Now, I go into quite a bit of detail about listeners in the handout, so please do take a look at that and read that. The big difference in the code, as you can see now, is I've added a few imports, which you can see. Again, you can cut and paste them. Well, you can cut and paste all of this code actually from the download, so that should make it easier for you. And we now declare the button inside the class. That gives us a button that we can reference at different points throughout the code, whereas before we didn't need to reference it, so we just created it when we needed it. Nothing much. We go through create the frame, we do the exit, we set layout to flow. I'll explain layouts in a different section of this course, of this module, sorry. And now you'll notice the big difference is we've added a couple of lines actually, of button equals new J button with the label press me. And then what we've done is we've told the button that we want to listen for an event. Now buttons, each of the different widgets support a whole load of different events, so you need to check which one for the type that you're using, or in this case I've just done a catch-all, so any event I react. But if you're looking to do different things on different events, maybe button up, button down, I think there's a get focus, lose focus, and so on. You could do a switch or a whole load of ifs as appropriate on that action event EVT that is passed into the action performed. So when an action is performed, I've told it to set the text to "you pressed me." Now, do you remember I told you that things are made the size they need to be unless you give them a fixed dimension, which we haven't. And so that's where the pack comes in. We've told it, we've changed things, so you need to reconstruct the windows. And of course, being container class and hierarchical, that has to message it all the way down, however many layers of widgets and whatever is appropriate for it to do so. So that's done that. Try it without doing the pack, just out of interest. It will still work, but it won't quite produce the results that are desirable. Now you can see I've added a git root pane set default button. Now we've only got one button, so that won't really make any difference in our case. There is only one. But you know, quite often you have a whole sequence of buttons, or sort of like a yes, no, or are you sure, yes, no, so on, confirm, all that sort of stuff. This is where you can set which one is the default focus. Okay, now we have to remember to add the button to the frame. We've constructed the button, now we add it to the frame. And we did that before, but we didn't have all that other stuff going on before we added it to the frame. That's the difference in this case. So we add the button, we tell the frame to pack, and then we say, okay, make it visible. And now you run the code and it should appear, and it should start off with a button. What did we tell it to say? Press me. And you press it and you should see some size changes, because the button has to be bigger now, because the text should change to "you pressed me" with a whole load of dots. So the button needs to be bigger to display that, and you should see that. And that's the consequence of those packs that we put in. Experiment, we actually call pack twice. Experiment with removing one or two of them, or just play around with those packs. You can see the effect that they have. I probably, as a matter of my personal style, so I'm not saying what I'm doing is right or wrong. Everyone develops their own coding habits and styles, and as my style, I probably call pack a few too many times. I think that's because on some occasions I've worked on some quite complex user interfaces and often ended up getting results that I wasn't quite expecting, and putting an extra pack in here and there seemed to help sort them out. So if anything, but that's just my style that's developed from my experience. I'm not saying it's the best or it's the only way. Play around, see, develop your own style as your experience grows with your own experiences. And so, the only thing we haven't actually covered in this is the part in main, which is what actually kicks everything off. Now, you'll know from other parts of this module that I've said Windows is event driven. And if you watched my complete introduction to programming, which is done using a language called Scratch, because it's a fantastic language to introduce people to the basic concepts, that's also event driven. Lots of things are. In fact, event driven seems to me pretty much the normal way of doing things these days. It's pretty much taken over as assume it is event driven unless you know it's not. That's just the way the world's gone. So anyway, being event driven means you need an event handler, which we've done with the action listener, but also you need something sitting there which is a loop. Now, I know in the early days of MS Windows 3.1.1, I think was the earliest I started coding on there. That had a loop that you had to add bits into the loop depending on what messages you wanted to trap and then pass on to specific parts of your code. Xmotif definitely has that. So does Java. Android does, and for what it's worth, on iPhones they also have it as well. They all do it subtly differently, but at concept level it's the same. There's a loop sitting there waiting for something to happen. When it happens, it then forwards it on. It's basically that. By using swing utils, that's how you get access, or one of the ways you get access to that loop manager. And what you're doing is you're telling the event manager or the loop manager that you're adding a new class for it to manage. So that's where you put it basically under its control. Invoke later, it just schedules it to say, well, there's a whole load of different invokes. Do a Google on swing utilities. There's an evoke later, an evoke something and wait, and there's various other options that are all used for different purposes. So I do recommend looking probably at the W3C schools page. They tend to do some good examples and give good explanations for things like that. Okay, you've done it. You're now at the end of this part of the course. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. As I've said, please do use the downloads, and as the modules of this course go on, the downloads need to become more and more, or the amount of detail needs to become more, and it gets far too long and probably far too boring for you to sit and watch as a video and just listen to. So I'm going to be putting the real guts of the details and the whys, because I've said quite often throughout all the courses I do, my objective as a teacher is to not teach you to just see, copy, do, I try to explain the why you do this, why is this important, and so on. But as it becomes more complex, it's more difficult to do it actually in the video, so I rely more heavily on the downloads for the real guts of the course. So please do use them. I put a lot of time and effort into making them, and I try to make them as clear and simple and as usable as possible. Plus, of course, you can print them out and take them with you wherever you go. So another bonus. Okay, as I said, I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for your time. Please check back for the next module, assuming you're following them, the actual course. Hopefully see you again soon. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe and click the bell. Goodbye.